Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me once again. You're always most welcome. Today, something different. I wanted to have a little bit of a thought-provoking video that would get the enthusiasm, get all the viewers and subscribers who make models, which is I'm sure most of you, if not all, get you thinking about what models are your favourites and why. Now, I'm kind of talking about your favourite ones that you've built mainly, although I have one exception to that, which I will explain in a moment. And I'm going to probably do 2 or 3 of these videos, just showing some of my work, but most of which you've probably seen before. But just to get the mind working and get you thinking about what is it that makes a model more enjoyable than another one. Now, at least one of these models here, which the two on the outside are actually very recent, as I'm sure most of you know, and the one that's just close to my right shoulder here is the dreaded SEA Harrier from Kinetic. And I've included this because this was clearly not an enjoyable build for me, and yet, and this is something that somebody else, I can't remember who said this, I think more than one person made a similar comment. It may have been Scott or Clive or one of you. There's been 2 or 3 of you said the same thing and said, but I bet when you finish this awful build, I bet it becomes one of your favourites. And it kind of has already in just a couple of weeks, because I beat it, you know, so I've got a reason to feel proud of the model. Now, what about you? You must have kits like that. I'm sure lots of you have built really bad kits and absolutely knocked them, you know, defeated them, beat them into submission basically. And then you sort of look at them and think, yeah, that is a nice Spitfire or Harrier or whatever it is, Lancaster, you know, Messerschmitt or Car. You think, yeah, that was a bit of a pig. Look at it now though. And this is the thing that's very important, because I've talked before about, we talked about mental health and we talked about, briefly touched on that, but talking really about mojo and the fact that this chap had written to me, which many of you have probably seen the comment where he said, I used to enjoy modelling, but I don't anymore because I look at everybody else's work, it's so much better than my own. And I said, I don't feel that way. It's not a competition, it's just about enjoying it yourself. Now here's my take on this, which I didn't really say the last time, and I want people to think about. The only person that you have to please is yourself. Anyone who criticises you or your models, frankly, either is doing it just to annoy you, frankly, and just to be unpleasant for whatever reason. I wouldn't respect anybody criticising any of my models unless I knew they were a better modeller than me, and then I would take the criticism on board and I'd say, well, where did I go wrong? What can I do better? You know, and try and learn from it as a positive experience. But the majority of people that look at your models, they won't be as critical as you are. They won't. And I have this test I call the sort of friends/neighbours test. And if I've got relatives, friends or neighbours that come in, and it happened to me just a couple of weeks ago over the Easter weekend. Somebody came in, an old friend of mine, and he was mighty impressed with all of my collection, I've got to say. And he was like, oh, you know, it looks really nice. And I thought, yeah, you know, and I look at them and think, I didn't quite get this right. And you beat yourself up over the tiniest stupid things, really, you know. I'm not sure I got that colour right, or was that marking in exactly the right place. But you do, don't you? We all do it. The only thing that matters is, do they impress other people? If they impress other people, you've won. It's as simple as that. If people say, oh, that's a nice Spitfire or whatever it is, that's a lovely McLaren, you know, Ferrari or whatever, that's it. You win, okay? That's it. Just to, you know, slap yourself on the back, have a drink and say, I did a nice model. Because it's, I can see that people are, I think with the social media and the internet, and there's a lot of magazines and online, I mean, you can instantly see, I mean, the videos on YouTube even, you know, I mean, I look at other people's work, some of these guys on YouTube, and I think, I could live to be 200, I'd never be as good as these guys if I did it every day. Some people just have a natural gift and a creative flair, and I think I'm quite good at model making, but I never let my ego get the better of me, because every time I turn up at Telford I think, oh boy, you know, it puts you right back in your place. It's quite amusing in a way, and it's all relative. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from other people and we can't take on board some of their clever creative ideas or techniques, you know. And obviously, you know, I'm on the Flory forum and you get lots of people on there with some amazing ability. Not least Phil Flory himself, of course, and he does all these tutorials you can see. And you can learn from it. I mean, I've learned one or two things from some of his techniques, and Matt as well, and all the rest of the team. They've all got great gifts, you know. You can never stop learning, and you know, I've probably got some abilities, perhaps in some of these high gloss finishes and things I've probably done quite well on. You can never stop learning. I did a video about that actually, just to give people a few tips of how I do it. Not saying I'm doing it perfect or right or anything, but if you like what I do and you want to get a similar effect, then go and see the Rattle Can Top Tips, I think I called it. That's from about 2 years ago. But getting back to the point, really, of you know, judging ourselves too harshly. I think we all do this. I think we all do it a lot, you know. And I think it's difficult. I mean, I saw two or three of these SEA Harriers that I thought, wow, they're amazing, you know. And I still think they're probably better than mine, but I'm very satisfied with what I produced, especially given the battle I had. And I say, that's interesting that that's gone from being the most hated kit I've ever had to one of the favourites, because it looks really nice. The finished product looks really nice. Just zoom in so you can see these three together. I'm not going to pick them up and muck about with them because I'll probably break something. In fact, I will just show you the motorbike in the background. Those of you that don't know, it's the Honda RC166. It's the bike that won the Isle of Man TT race in 1966. And then it dominated the sport for a number of years, and its sort of sister bikes did as well. Now that's a different story, which I'll come to in a minute. So to give you the quick tale of these three, to give you an idea about how they can have different reasons for being favourites. Well, one on the right we all know about now. Obviously, it's a recent thing. So that's been an absolute pig nightmare kit. One of the most frustrating of all time. Not saying it's the worst kit of all time. It's not. But it just frustrates you at every stage. So that was a nightmare, and look at it now, it looks absolutely great, so I'm very pleased with that. So that's become my favourite kit because it's a nice result, and it, you know, better than it deserved to be, really. One on the left is kind of similar. That's the Gulf Porsche, the Steve McQueen Gulf Porsche. And that, of course, was this is an interesting one, which I think a lot of people will identify with, because that was the one that had this mojo failure, one of my worst ever, when I went through a period of not doing any modelling. I mean, I've had a problem last year with this, my elbow. I've still got issues with my wrist, right wrist, and the shoulder a little bit as well. Not major, obviously, because it hasn't stopped me modelling recently. But this all coincided. I started building that Porsche, and the same day I started building it, Sterling Moss died, and I was quite upset about that. And it's not directly related in any way, but my mojo just evaporated, and I lost interest in building completely. And I didn't get it back, you know, and I didn't build anything for a year. It was just terrible, really. And then, of course, I forced, after 2 years, I decided it's got to be done, you know. So that was, 2021, Easter. And then I managed to get it completed for late autumn in 2022. Sorry, 2020. Sorry, Sterling Moss died Easter Sunday 2020. So it's 2020 to 2020, autumn of 2022. The Harrier we know about, that was just a complete mojo killer in itself. So that there was no reason the mojo fell off. This wasn't a great kit. It's not, again, Fujimi can be a bit, you know, it's not a great kit. People will tell you it's got issues. The body's not well formed and it doesn't clip together, and there's all sorts of stuff. But it's not that bad. Whereas the Harrier was bad in so many ways at so many different levels. Now the one in the middle, the motorbike, I'm going to zoom in on. This was not a bad kit at all. Now this is favourite for very positive reasons. But it was a very tough challenge. And if any of you have never built one of these bikes, you won't probably know what I'm talking about. But the challenge was, it's not really model making, it's more like watchmaking. It requires different skills, and you need to be on your A game, because this has got some very remarkable elements to it. I'm just going to point in a little bit more so we can see it a bit better. There we go. Now then, one or two of you may have seen this before, but and by the way, I'll just tell you a funny story actually. Just before I came on air to shoot this, I was going to shoot this an hour ago, this video, and I discovered that the motorbike had some problems and I needed to repair it. And it was the chain. This has got, and this is the story really. This motorbike it's got metal spokes, metal wheels, alloy. It's got a working front suspension, and it's got a working chain. All extras from the standard kit from Tamiya. They're all these detail up parts, these aftermarket Tamiya upgrades. but the chain wasn't working. The chain itself was fine, and the chain is very complex. It's about 2 millimeters in thickness, 1.5, 2 millimeters. It's tiny. You'll see in a minute. It operates properly, just like a real chain. It's fantastic. But it was the inner disc that the sprocket drives the chain to drive the rear wheel, and the sprocket and the wheel had become detached from each other. And it wasn't obvious, of course. I think the adhesive failed. It wasn't glued on with enough aggression. And when I came to repair it, I tried to repair it in the conventional way, and it didn't really work. And the same thing happened. So I put super glue on it now, so it's fine. Anyway, let's have a look, because that was a bit of a pressure moment trying to get this ready so I can get it on the screen for you. I'm going to be very gentle with it because it is a very beautiful and very delicate thing. So what I'll do is I'll just turn it around a little, very, very gentle with this. And if you watch carefully, you should be able to see, just turn it a little bit more, you should be able to see the working chain. Can you see that? Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's like a Swiss watch, literally. It's quite remarkable. Not simply plastic engineering anymore, but real engineering. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm not going to mess about operating the suspension, but just take my word for it that it's got this working front suspension, and the rear, though the rear is not quite as good, I have to say, in the execution by Tamiya. But this was a very, very different build to everything else I've got, really, where you need your biggest, most zoomy glasses, magnifying glasses, and on top of that, you need optivisors or similar. You're going to need everything for that because it's so tiny. You have to create the chain, which is PE, and you have to cut out every single link and then put these pins in, and you have to be in the most calm, relaxed frame of mind. You must be totally focused. You've got to be like in a Zen mode, like Yoda, to have any sort of chance to really get to grips with it, because it's such a complex kit, Sorry, my phone's just bleeping about something. I'll switch that off. We don't need that, do we? There we go. So that is probably, all joking apart, my greatest kit, as well as being one of my favourite builds. I'm just going to zoom it in one more time because I want to just show you. I might even put it on the spin just to give you some entertainment. Shall we spin it? Oh no, the battery's flat. I won't be spinning it. Okay, I'll have to do it manually. I think that one of the reasons I like this so much is I actually it took 5 months to build. Let's just go back in a bit closer. 5 months to build this, and I kind of nailed it. And this is the one kit where I didn't really make, apart from one tiny mistake, I didn't really make any mistakes, which is very unusual. The only mistake I made was it wasn't so much an error by me, but I had a bit of a chemical reaction on the silver on the fairing, actually. I had this weird chemical reaction took place. I'd used Alclad, and I think it touched an area where there was some of the acrylic, and they reacted, and I had a bit of a problem, so I had to respray part of it. But it wasn't something, that an error particular that I'd done. It was something completely out of the blue, really. But in the end, it's beautiful, beautiful. And I even deliberately used the decals in a way to replicate the creases on the real bike. And they often use these stick-on vinyl roundels with the numbers on the front. And I deliberately went with that rather than get the aftermarket, which was smaller and they were done in such a way that would be very perfect looking. I thought, well, actually, I've seen these, and they often look in the 60s very last minute stuck on. So I deliberately created. Did you see that? They're very, very tiny. It's quite subtle, actually, hard to see. But there's these very faint creases in the white vinyl effect. It's a decal, obviously. I don't know if you can see that, but it's not a flaw. That's kind of deliberate. You can just about make it out, I think. Maybe on the left side there at about 9 o'clock as you're looking at it now. One or two little creases and things. Oh, did that just start to go on its own then? It runs and it doesn't run. Yeah, anyway. Oh, it's decided to start working, so maybe the battery's got a little bit of life in it after all. But there we go. Anyway, that was my greatest build in terms of sheer quality. It was a real Ron Dennis job. Those of you that know I'm a fan of Ron Dennis, he's the OCD perfectionist, obsessive boss that used to be in charge of McLaren in Formula 1. And I very much approached that in the way that he would, I think. And it was tough. It was tough. If anybody's built that kit who's watching, they'll say, yeah, but it's flawless. It's not like the SEA Harrier at all. I can recommend this kit. 10 out of 10 from me, absolutely 10 out of 10. Absolutely brilliant piece of engineering by Tamiya and that. It's incredible. Anyway, I'm going off the subject a little bit. So there we go. So there's, I was just showing those, but if I can just put it in the background and it'll behave itself and keep going. No matter, I could probably stop again. I like the way it's going really slowly. That actually works quite nicely, I think. So, yeah. So what are your favourite builds and why? You know, one of my favourite models. What your favourite models, I suppose, is, but rather than builds, is what I'm getting at. One of my favourite models wasn't built by me; it's built by my dad, and it's not the greatest. It stopped. It's dead. It's not the greatest build ever, because my dad wasn't very advanced in the modelling. He was just hand painting with Umbro and stuff, you know. And he built this model when he was 80, and he died just a few short months after he built it, only a couple of months later. So that's got another one that's got great emotional attachment for me. It sits in my sort of 1970s RAF collection. It's the BAC Strike Master by Matchbox, by the way. Not the greatest kit, not the greatest build, but it's so important emotionally, you know. Last thing my dad did related to modelling, which I persuaded him to do, by the way. But he used to work on the Strike Master at British Aircraft Corporation in the 70s, so I gave him this Matchbox and said, why don't you build it, you know. And I was very surprised and pleased that he did, along with other things he left me. But anyway, I'm going off the subject there. But another emotional reason to have a favourite model, you know. And I've got others where, I'm going to go into them in a separate video, others where the easiest build of all time, which is the Thunderbolt, which I'll show you. One of the trickier builds, which was the MiG-25 from ICM, but again, really enjoyed it. Very enjoyable build, despite being a bit tricky at times. Very, very good fun and a great result. And then we've got things like the Tamiya Spitfire and there's a lot of Tamiyas in here, I've got to tell you. The Tamiya BF109 G6, the 48 scale one, which is fantastic, and again, very like the Thunderbolt, a dream build, really, a dream build. And people say, oh well, yeah, you know, this is another thing to consider. People say, I don't want them to fall together, that's not modelling, you know, that's just assembling, you know. Well, that's not quite true, because when you see these kits, you'll see that because I enjoyed the build, and that this is kind of what happened with the Harrier to a degree and some of the other bad builds I've had, when you get to that point where you just think, I've had enough of this, I hate this, you know. Now I did overcome this temptation with the Harrier because I did a bit of extra on it, obviously with the ladders and the Sharky Ward character and all that stuff. But with a lot of them I just think, that's it, I just want the most basic kit, finish it and get it off the bench, because I don't enjoy that, and I'm sure a lot of you don't enjoy it either. But when you see these Tamiyas that have been an absolute doddle, I am far more inclined to start doing additional finishing and weathering and adding characters. So with the 109 I added a load of figures, got loads of figures actually in my cabinet now, and it was all because of the 109 really. And I've got this beautiful diorama scene with all this Luftwaffe aircrew working on it, and spray painting, engineers working on the engine and all sorts. And it just brings the whole thing to life, which we'll look at, I say, separately. Some of you have probably seen that kit already, it's a beauty. Got the engine panels open and everything. And you can swap them out and put the closed panels back on if you want, because it's got magnets. So that's a real boon, you know, that's something that's, I can't recommend that kit highly enough. Along with the Thunderbolt, I think it's probably one of my all-time favourite kits in terms of value. About £33, and you get so much in that box, really. You know, you get cannon gondolas under the wings as an option, and you get all these little magnets. It's clever. And then they brought out the Spitfire, which was a nice kit, but was nothing like in the same effort, shall we say, from them. Which I didn't quite understand why they didn't bother with engine, didn't bother with any of that stuff. Very strange. Anyway. But you get these kits and you look at them and you think, oh, that's great fun, that really was fantastic, enjoyed it thoroughly. And then there's others like another interesting one, the Meng ME163. We'll have a look at that as well. The Comet. That was a tricky build in some areas, but again, thoroughly enjoyable and great subject. Well executed by Meng. Not perfect, but well executed overall. And well conceived in the way you can display it with the Valter rocket motor out the back and all this stuff. Really, everybody comments on that. They all like that, you know. So this is what I'm saying. We shouldn't get too hung up about our preconceptions and our hopes of how a build will turn out. I see people look at some of mine, not all of them because they're not all great, some of them are old, but they look at one or two of these that I've done a good job on and that they've been good kits, and they just, you see, it just blows them away, you know. And that is the acid test, and it doesn't matter if, you know, Spencer Pollard or Chris Warchop or Florian or all these other genius guys out there would do it better than me or you. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Just getting back to this sort of key theme about enjoying your modelling, really. I mean, these are particularly good looking models I've got here, but yeah, you probably need some advanced skills for the finishes on those racing cars and things. That's a little bit more tricky. But the SEA Harrier wasn't too bad in terms of the skill level. Was all about patience and determination rather than modelling skill. I think I had to just brutally wade through the battle. It was almost like, you could argue a good analogy would be like in warfare. This especially the Tamiya was like a precision strike with laser guided weapons, you know. Whereas the SEA Harrier was more like a Viking battle. Chopping and hacking and blood and guts and horror. That's the kind of way it was. But you don't have to be an expert, you know, to enjoy your modelling. You don't have to be a great professional painter. You know, you don't have to be. Even these subjects, you know, you can by polishing things, you can get away with paint finishes that are perhaps not as satisfactory as you might like. If you give it a damn good polish afterwards, you can cut back the paint, you can really make it smooth and make it lift and then give it a clear coat and you're done, you know. But anyway, the theme of the talk really was just today was to stimulate your own thoughts about your models and tell me about them. Which are your favourite builds and why? I mean, I've got others I'll bring out, and some of these you'll have built as well, and they're probably your favourites, perhaps of your own as well. You may recognise one or two of them, things like the Tamiya Spitfire and the Mustang and stuff like that. Just to provoke some thought. You know, what are the most satisfying models? It's not always the easiest ones, you know. So there's the proof. I've got the most difficult, probably the most frustrating model I've ever built is this one. The most intricate and technically challenging was probably this one, and yet that was a bit of a dog, and that was perfect. Yeah, and yet they're both still here on this in this discussion as favourites. And it's like that with the others, you know. It's not always the easy ones that you really appreciate. If you have a great result and you've been through hell, then all the more reason to appreciate the final verdict, final outcome in terms of the model. So let's have a talk about it. What are your favourites? Why are they your favourites? What are your favourite builds? What are your favourite models? They may not be the same. They may not be the same. Sometimes you can have a fantastic build, and I mean, I've done this, and I've got one or two that I thought the model ends up good, looks great, but a bit bland, perhaps. You know, perhaps I didn't put enough into it. And of course, we all get better over time, and we should do, as long as we're wearing our glasses as we get older. You know what I mean. But yeah, what is it that you really find enjoyable in terms of when you're making the models? What is it that makes, you know, if you had a shelf, the Premier League shelf and then the Division 1 shelf and so on. Well, I definitely would have the motorbike on my Premier League shelf for sure. I think that SEA Harrier, since it's completed, it's just grown on me. I've now got it actually in the cabinet on its invincible deck with Sharky Ward. And it just looks the business now, you know. It looks the business under the bright lights. It looks absolutely great. And it belies the horror that I had to go through. And yet, that's part of the attraction, I suppose, isn't it, really? Anyway, have a think about what I've said. Please, if you're watching live chat, just keep commenting. If you're just watching the show after it's been broadcast, no problem at all. Please comment in the comments. And just tell me your sort of top 3, top 5. And why? Why? What was it that made you, you know, gave you that warm, enthusiastic, fuzzy feeling about them? Why is it occupying a special place in your heart and your cabinet? Or top of the chest of drawers, or living room, or wherever you put it. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to come back with a few more to talk about. It might stimulate more thoughts from you. I say it's interesting in this particular three here because we've got three with very different stories. One's a mojo killer. One, I lost my mojo, no fault of the kit really, and the other one was just prepare for the mother of all technical challenges and be, you know, drink a lot of coffee, be on your A game, no alcohol when you're building this. Because I tell you what, you're looking at parts so tiny and fine. The spokes and the spoke nipples for the actual wheels, they're the tiniest things you've ever seen. They're about 1 millimetre across. They're just unbelievable. And you are going to lose them if you're not on your A game. You've got to be so organised. I had these little white trays, I think you've seen them. These little white parts trays, and I had spoke nipples in one, spokes in the other, the chain pins in another, I had the chain links in another. And it was like, there's a building the Honda RC166 video. Go and have a look at that. I'll perhaps put a link at the end of this. And you go and have a look at that. You'll see me with my every pair of glasses I've got, straining to see this stuff, which is just tiny. It's like nano engineering. Anyway, I'm not complaining. That's not a moan, because that is turned out to be the most wonderful looking model, as you've seen. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope you'll give me 10 out of 10 with a thumbs up. And please do. It's not just about my kits today. It's really trying to get you to talk about what is it that makes a kit particularly satisfying. Is it the build? I mean, I say the SEA Harrier. No, it's not the build. It's definitely not the build. Is it the result? Or is it both? You might have something that you've triumphed and you've enjoyed the build and perhaps overcome just modest challenges. Or perhaps you've done, you know, something unusual, extras like rigging or added detail, you know, dioramas. The sky's the limit, isn't it, really? So what is it that has really won your most prized position in your cabinet? What is it and why? Interested to hear. Anyway, I'm going to come back with a second or maybe third one of these videos, showing just a variety, because we need some armour and some other aeroplanes and things. I think we'll get those out, and it'll make you think about what you've got on the shelf. Tell me all about it. It'd be very interesting to share. And as I said, in terms of the way you approach it, don't compete with people in your mind. Don't let this become a competition. If you end up with a Tiger tank or whatever it is on the shelf that looks really good, I mean, I've got a Tiger. It's not the most weathered or intricately finished, but it does look damn good, you know. And everybody says, "Well, nice Tiger, that is a nice Tiger tank," you know. And that's before I get the big one going, you know. This one. So that's it. You have a think about it. What is it that really gets pride of place, and why? Anyway, thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please stay safe and stay well, and I look forward to coming back and talking about this again a bit more in the not too distant future. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.